I'm delighted today to be joined by Becky Laverty, and I'm going to try and do a good introduction of your background, but you can fill in the gaps if I miss anything out. So Becky is head of European manager at Prosthetic Records, also a freelance publicist who worked with one of my albums of last year, Cave In, Heavy Pain, which came out last year, and also is a booking manager, I don't know if that's the right word, for Roadburn Festival.
Yeah, that's about right, yeah.
Yes, look at that. Bang on. So first of all, thank you, Becky, for taking the time out of your no doubt busy schedule to chat to little old me.
Thank you for having me.
Are you okay? Are you ready?
I'm good, I'm ready. Let's do this.
Cool. So I hope I've gave a good picture there of what you do. On the outset, it seems very high level, but I imagine amongst all of it, there is a lot more moving parts. What I'm going to start with is, first of all, is your role with Prosthetic Records.
Yeah.
I spoke to Will not long ago, who I don't know the chain of command between the two of you, so I'm not going to make any suggestions, but I spoke to Will. Will sends a lot of promo stuff on, sets up a load of interviews. Prosthetic Records has a great roster at the moment. Without Waves is one of my albums of last year as well.
Yeah.
So you're European manager, is that right? Yeah.
Label manager, yeah.
Label manager.
But, I mean, I think that's probably, I think we settled on that as a job title because my job was kind of quite vague and encompassed various different things. So yeah, that's what we settled on. But I've been with Prosthetic for nearly 4 years now. I worked freelance for them a little bit before that. I worked on albums by Venom Prison and the Atlas Moth and Leached, and clearly they found me irresistible and offered me a job. So I've been there nearly 4 years, and a couple of years ago we took on Will to sort of be our press assistant. So I kind of oversee what he does, but he's very much his own man, you know, he knows what he's doing now. So yeah, I've been there for nearly 4 years, and good, I like it. We've got a lot of great bands, and yeah, it keeps me busy.
It's a great roster of bands you have, and I've spoken to someone the other day about Roadrunner, which back in the day, now sorry, I don't know your age, I'm not going to ask you your age, but back in the
40 this year. I'm old.
Way. Yeah. May I say you look fantastic for 40.
You.
Well done. Well, I'm 38 then, so we're near enough. I look a lot older though, you can tell. But sorry, we're talking about Roadrunner, and certainly when I was growing up, Roadrunner was the label that if you saw a band on Roadrunner, you knew it was going to be a good band.
So when I first got the internet, when I was a teenager, the first place I went on the World Wide Web was the Roadrunner Records forum, and made some friends there that I still know today. So there you go. I used to love Roadrunner. Yeah,
and I mean, it's sort of, I'm not really sure of what's happening now. Like it definitely seems to be a lot less big in terms of metal bands on there now. Like back in the day when Slipknot started, it was huge. Then you had Trivium, Killswitch Engage, all the new metal bands sort of were on there. But Prosthetic now, just talking back to your label, is a really great roster of diverse bands. You've got loads of good stuff in there. Mathcore, if you want to call it that. You've got black metal, you know, a lot of things. And it's great to see a label like this. Would you consider Prosthetic an underground label, Becky?
Well, it's definitely an independent label, and we sign underground bands. EJ, one of the owners of the label, sort of says that we kind of have a terrible business model because we like signing bands that are small, maybe bands that have never released an album before, or they may have done, but you know, we do sign underground bands, and if we do our job well, by the time they are at the end of their contract with us, then really they should be going on to a bigger label, and they should be like, you know, have the world at their feet. So if we do our job well, we lose our bands. after a couple of albums. So yes, I think it is by definition probably still an underground label working with underground bands, but our intention is to, you know, help them a little out of the underground if that's what they want to do.
Do you see that as part of your objective? As, let's just talk about yourself personally, Becky. A band, and I'm just going to pick one out of the sky now and say,
pick a good one.
let's just say, Without Waves, for argument's sake, okay?
Okay.
Just while we're here. Do you see if they then sign for, let's say, Nuclear Blast, for argument's sake, do you see that as a personal achievement for you? Or do you see it as a, we let them get away sort of thing?
It's obviously a huge compliment if a band comes to the end of their contract and wants to re-sign and thinks there's more that you can do together. But yeah, I think it's a great thing if they go on to bigger and better things. And I really, speaking entirely personally, like as a publicist and just the way I view music and art, if that's what a band's goal is, if that's their ambition to go and be a full-time musician and really have this be their whole life, then they probably do need to be on a bigger label. And if we're part of the process of them getting there, then I think that's a great thing. But that's not necessarily what all bands want to do. Success comes in very many different shapes and forms, and I think there is no one size fits all sort of plan for how to have a band be successful. Some bands can commit more than others. Some bands want to do things that other bands have no interest in doing. Sometimes we have bands that don't play live, others who tour for 6 months of the year. So every band is different. But yes, if a band's goal is to go on to a bigger label, then I consider it to be a huge success if that's what they do at their end of their time with us.
And I'll put you on the spot a bit now. So Prosthetic had a good, another one that I forgot to mention was Stop Pro, which was again on my album of the year list last year. Absolutely bonkers album in such a good way. I absolutely loved it. What was or you can give me a couple, your favourite releases off Prosthetic in 22?
Oh no, I'm gonna forget what albums came out. I'll name some from 3 years ago. Am I allowed to cheat? Am I allowed to look at the release schedule?
Yeah, you can indeed. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, Undeath. Definitely.
Yes.
That one's easy. I know that one came out last year. I'm going to see them on Sunday. So what else did we have last year?
That's a nice package they've got as well, Undeath, with the Celestial Sanctuary as well.
Yes, I went to Chicago in December to see Undeath, so I've already seen them live. I snuck in there early, couldn't wait another month, and they're amazing live too. So
I imagine so.
Funeral Chic, I really loved that album last year. And Phobophilic, who I also saw playing with Undeath in Chicago, great live band. Who else did we have? I am going to cheat and have a little look. And God Alone, that's a very different band to a lot of stuff we have on Prosthetic.
The boys from Cork, just down the road from me. Wow,
yeah.
Down the road.
Yeah, they're great. So yeah, those are probably. I mean, it's hard to beat Undeath at the moment, I think.
It really has that Cannibal Corpse feel of traction behind them that I've not seen about a death metal band for a while. Everyone was talking about that album last year,
and they're having a great time. Well, it seems to me they are anyway. They're full of joy. They're a pleasure to watch live, and they're a pleasure to work with. And everyone that's part of making Undeath what they are and getting them on the road and getting their albums out is great. So I think there's a lot more to come for them. And this is not going to be the last time they're in the UK this year. I'd be surprised if it was. So I think we'll see a lot more of them. So yeah.
And that seems to me like a bit of an insider sort of information, but you're not spilling anything. I
I'm
mean,
not saying
surely they're going to be on festival bills, like.
I hope so. That's the plan. But yeah, I think it's a gamble for any band, especially at the moment over the how things have been the last couple of years with live music. But I think it's always a gamble for a band to take the leap and come over to Europe, and of course vice versa. And in the grand scheme of things, this tour that Undeath are doing is quite a short one. It's just the UK. And they're decent venues, but they're not huge, but they're selling out. Like, they've sold out several of the dates, and almost sold out some others. So I think I'd be very surprised if they're not all sold out on the nights, but that's a great start for them. And it's not something everybody can do and has the momentum to do. So when that opportunity presents itself, you have to go for it.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'm very pleased with them.
I mean, touring, like, this is probably going a bit off, it's on the same topic, but going off the questions I had, but like touring these days, I mean, I saw the other day some band went online and on social media and said, look, we can't do this anymore. Like, we can't tour with this, not financially viable. And we always say, like, the likes of Metallica, Maiden, AC/DC, all that, they'll be fine. But when it comes to bands that we love, that are underground or smaller bands, it's heartbreaking to see them that they can't get out after all the hard work they put in for the last 8, 10, 12 more years, and they can't get out. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, before we started this podcast officially, before we started recording, you said, we stay away from you stay away from politics, but I think it's hard to stay away from politics when you talk about this, because it's such a joined up thing. Like, the music industry is not like fully functional. There are parts of it that work great for certain people and parts of it that don't for others, and by definition I think that becomes a political thing. But I won't go too far down that path, because I will end up ranting and we'll tie ourselves in knots. But I think part of the reason that there is no, kind of what I said earlier, there is no one size fits all for being a band and how to make it work for you. But there are a lot more obstacles now than there were even a few years ago. And it's very hard to find people that work in the music industry that genuinely have a good overview of all facets of what it takes to be a successful band. Because when bands do post stuff like that it's not viable for them to be a touring band anymore, people are very quick to come up with the solutions. Well, people need to buy more tickets, or you should raise your ticket prices, or you should lower your ticket prices, or you should, there's always a solution, but it's very rarely thought of as part of like an overall plan for how to be a successful band. And as I say, success means different things for different people. Some people have never had any intention of making money from being on tour. They just want to, get some of their expenses covered. But when that becomes unviable, then of course there's something broken. And it's increasingly difficult. And but at the same time as that, we're told, and it's true to some extent, that things are more equitable than ever. Anyone can release music. You can record in your bedroom, you can release stuff on Bandcamp, you can reach a global audience. All of that is true, but it doesn't mean that you will achieve what everyone else is capable of achieving. And it's complicated. There isn't a solution to that would work for everybody, but undoubtedly it is harder touring at the moment.
Two-part question now.
Do
you think streaming music, the likes of Spotify, etc., has killed a lot of this for bands? And two, what are your thoughts on streaming services?
Has killed a lot of what for bands?
So, for example, bands would have made royalties off record sales, physical, back in the day. Now they're having to tour to try and make a living. The stories of bands going out and they're having to sell merch just to cover expenses, like you were saying, for example. So do you think the streaming has killed that part of it for bands? And two, or has it given more exposure? And two, what's your thoughts on it?
So I think that this is a huge question which could take up the entire podcast. And I also think it's something that would be very interesting for you to dive into. Maybe you could get a couple of other people to be participants in a broader conversation about that, so you have other perspectives. Because from my perspective, like working for a label and a festival, in fact, I think that streaming services as a discovery tool are invaluable, and therefore undoubtedly bands reach a much bigger audience than they otherwise would have done if they didn't have their music on Spotify. But what I think has been so devastating within that is that as part of the package of using those services, music has been devalued in a literal sense, in a financial sense, that we no longer think that we have to pay for music that we access. And of course, people do I pay to use streaming services. But it's a negligible amount of money when you think about how can, like, you know, even if the money that I spent on Spotify was actually distributed fairly to the artists that I listen to, it's still a tiny amount per artist. Yeah. So and that's without diving into all of the convoluted ways that streaming payouts are not fair and they're not equitable. But it's there's been a shift in public music consumer fandom like perspective that we don't have to pay for music anymore, and I think that's very, very hard to reverse. I don't have a solution. Before you ask me that, I definitely don't know the solution. But so yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It's definitely bands 100%. A lot of bands benefit from their music being on streaming services, and yeah, it does negatively impact on the financial side of things. But again, I don't know that this is a solution that can be found. Unfortunately, it's unlikely to be independent labels, independent bands that are going to come up with a solution for this, because they might have great ideas and they might have a more tuned in fan base and have greater access directly to their fan base a lot of the time, but they're part of a big machine, and it's the big machine that dictates how that part of the industry runs. So yeah, it's tricky.
Excuse me. I mean, working for a label like you do, when you're releasing, let's just take Undeath for argument's sake. So you're coming up to the release of the album, it's all good to go, and you're now talking about what physical formats can we do? We're talking vinyl and CDs, maybe cassettes, perhaps, I don't know. With streaming services that are in mind or that are in play, do you now just take a massive reduction in the in the production of these records, like vinyl, for example? Back in the day, they might have said, right, let's print 200,000 copies. That's just obviously not, but these days, is it like, right, well, let's just do 250 of this variant, 250 of this variant, and see how it goes, and then we can reproduce after? Yeah,
well, in the time that I've been at Prosthetic, it's been quite a ride when it comes to stuff like vinyl, because in the early days of the pandemic, there was a huge spike in vinyl production, lead times, vinyl production demand, all of that. Like, so people were buying vinyl for a year, 18 months at a rate that was unprecedented, essentially. And I think it's been well documented, and I'm sure you've discussed it plenty of times on your podcast, even the delay in vinyl manufacture and how it has affected releases and stuff like that. So even in just the 4 years that I've been at production, there's been this huge like spike and then a downturn, because now the economic situation in the UK, but obviously worldwide, impacts on people's disposable income. And now, even if you're like a diehard music fan, during the pandemic, your money would be going on merch and records. Now you have the option to go back to shows, and you want to go and do that, and you want to go and support artists, so you go and do some of that. So that by definition means part of your disposable income is no longer going to records. that's the way I choose to look at it anyway. There's probably all sorts of other elements involved with those sorts of decisions, but vinyl still sells really well. There's no doubt about that, but it's not at the height that it was 2 years ago. And sometimes there is an element of gambling because although production times have also come down considerably, we're still often putting stuff into production months before it's announced. So if we announce a band and it takes off and starts selling very well, then we start getting nervous. Have we made enough records? Have we got time to get some more made? Yeah, there's a lot of part art, part science when it comes to like getting that right. And of course you don't want to, it's great if a band sells really well, but you don't want to sell out of everything that you've made, because then if that band's going to go on tour, they need a product to take on tour and to sell there. So it's a lot of adjustment along the way and second guessing and years of experience. And I'm not taking the credit for the years of experience. Steve, the US label manager, is the mastermind when it comes to establishing what's gonna work for each band. But yeah, it's tricky for sure.
Let's try and lighten the mood a bit now, shall we?
Okay.
We did that, but that was a really interesting chat. Thanks for answering those questions. Like, it's interesting to get a view from the label's end about how it works and the dynamics of it. But your role, Becky, I want to know, do you like your job? Do you ever wake up in the morning and go, oh, I've got work?
Occasionally, but it's usually after I've been out doing the most fun part of my job, which is going and meeting bands and seeing bands and doing that. And then I get home late and I've got to get up the next day and do something that's the more mundane end of my job. I've got to finish doing some spreadsheets, and it's like, oh man, why can't I pretend that my job is all going to see bands? But no, I love my job. It's stressful and it's hard balancing 2 or more jobs at any given time, but I've kind of got used to it now and I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. Sometimes I do think I should probably do a little bit less work, but it never quite happens. So I think this is the downfall, or the downside I should say, of when what is essentially your hobby becomes your job. Then you have no I keep going, I should find some other hobbies, but I don't know. So I love my job.
But I mean, like, it's prosthetics not just your sole job. You said, as we said earlier, like you've got Roadburn, which we'll come back to again in a bit, but you're doing freelance as well at times for the likes of Cave In, which we talked about through, is it Pioneer Music? Yeah, so
about 15 years ago I set up my own freelance company, Pioneer Music Press, and I had no idea what I was doing at the beginning. Made it up as I went along and hoped for the best, and I pretty much still do that now. But so I was a freelance publicist, and I worked for various independent bands and labels. The first label that hired me was Earache, and then Relapse hired me. And all through doing those labels and various other projects along the way, I was a freelance. Like I was never somebody's in-house publicist. And I used to kind of joke that like maybe I had like a fear of commitment, but I've been with Roadburn for 8 years and I've been with Prosthetic for 4 years, so I think I'm quite good at commitment. But I think it's more that like I really enjoyed the variety of different bands that I could work with being a freelance. So yes, I did that. I've done that for 15 years, but then now when I started at Roadburn, I was hired to be their international publicist, and my job has evolved over the years, and I've taken on more responsibility almost every year. And then obviously now I'm doing prosthetic as well, and that just doesn't really leave me very much time for freelance projects. So I say no to almost everything, but I'm very grateful to be asked still. But I still have a good relationship with the people at Relapse, obviously, and they know that Cave In is my favorite band. So they came to me about working on that. But yeah, I really only do maybe 1 or 2 freelance projects a year now, and it has to be something that works out timing wise and something that I really believe in, that I know I can do, and that I know I can do justice to, because the last thing I'd want to do is take on a band that I love and not have the time to do it. So that's my one bit of being sensible, saying no more.
And are Cave In your favourite band?
Oh yeah, I love them.
It was a question I had for you later on, but that's
no, yeah, I came to this conclusion a few years ago when I was like, I think I've loved Cave In for more than half of my life now. So I think that's quite a big commitment. And yeah, I love them, and the new album is great. And of course I'm biased because I was paid to tell people it was great, but thankfully it was a very easy thing to tell people that. Yeah, I think that, yeah, it's great. But like when I am working on an album like that, it's a great privilege to be able to work with a band that I love so much. And in some ways it's a similar sort of thing when I get to book a band that I really like at Roadburn. But when there can be like I'm very conscious of ensuring there is not a conflict of interest wherever possible, because you know, I'm sometimes sat here looking at other people doing things which I'm like, I don't think that makes sense. So I'm always very conscious of that. So I'm part of a booking team at Roadburn. So of course I would say you should book Cave In, but I'd say that every year. You can't trust me. But there are other people at Roadburn who it has to get past them first. You know, like they can't just let me run riot. Yes, so it's great to be able to have Cave In at Roadburn this year, but it wasn't all down to me. I can't take credit for that, because then I would be being quite biased. And yeah, Cave In would play every year if it was down to me. But yeah, so it was great to work with them on their new album. I was thrilled. So yes, it's
a brilliant album, so good. And do you know, the music video along with it was just my favorite. Like,
which one?
The new
the one with the space suits, or the one
below? Yeah, that one at the end where he comes in and he's like, what's everyone doing here? And they just get up and run out. I love bands who can make a joke and not take themselves too seriously as well. It's so nice to see. But I mean, we might as well come to Roadburn, because you've just talked about booking Cave In for it. So Roadburn, I've not been myself to Roadburn. Yeah, I know. I've not been myself, but it's obviously one of these festivals that you hear a lot about. And the only other sort of comparison I can put to Roadburn in the UK would be the likes of Arctangent, in terms of I don't know if niche is the right word, but do you know what I mean? Like, it's not a major download festival where you're going to get the same bands. You're going to get a lot of underground and obscure bands. So how did you come about getting onto, first of all, being the international publicist, and then working your way up to booking bands for the festival?
So I attended Roadburn before I worked for them, and I think the first time I went was maybe 2012, something like that. And I went a couple of times, and through my work I had a few bands that were playing. I think one year when I was working for Relapse, there was something like 10 bands playing. So I would always have like a little bit of work to do when I was there. So it was part fun, part work. And through visiting the festival, I met Walter, who's the artistic director of Roadburn. And we sort of stayed in touch a little bit. I probably sent him music of, you know, bands I was working on. And he came over to London and didn't have anywhere to stay. So he asked if he could stay on my sofa, which he did, befriended my cats, and we went to see Godflesh together. and I think probably, yeah, struck up a friendship from there. And then shortly after that, he asked if I would like to come and work for Roadburn. And I said yes, without really knowing what the job was. And then I was like, oh my God, I hope it's a job I know how to do. And it was. So yeah, I think my job title was press and communications, which is quite broad. So and it kind of evolved almost every year. Like I say, so my duties the first year were sort of making sure people were covering it in the press and inviting press to come and review it and setting up interviews and doing various things like that. And then I started working on the side program, so I put together panel discussions, Q&As. I've been involved in some art exhibitions and things like that. And then, yeah, each year I would end up taking on like a little bit extra. So then the next year it became officially part of my job. And for a little bit over a year now, I've been part of the bookings team with Walter, who oversees everything as the artistic director, and one of the in-house promoters at the O13 venue in Tilburg, Joelle. So the three of us are the booking team at Roadburn. And yeah, it's great. I love it.
What makes it, because it seems from the outside looking in like a very special festival, like unique, and every person I've seen or spoke to who's been to it says it's just amazing. So what makes it such a good festival?
So Roadburn as an entity started 25 years ago, and part of the origins of the festival was actually a blog. Walter was previously a music journalist, and I think when maybe the magazine he worked for closed, I think, and a friend helped him set up a blog and for him to be able to continue to share the bands he discovered. So him and some friends did that, and that was the origin of Roadburn. And then from that they put on a show, and then a longer show, an all day, then it became a weekender, then it turned into a festival. And it grew gradually, and the community was always a very strong part of it. Roadburn's roots are in community. So as it grew to be a bigger festival, and it attracted more international visitors and international bands, the community still remains at the heart of it. And I think that's my take on it. That's why I think it has become so special, because I think that community element is more visible now. And it's I again, you can't really trust me, I am biased, but I think it's like the most, like, I mean, like I said, I attended Roadburn before I worked for them, and I had heard all of this stuff before I went. Oh, it's so friendly, everyone's so welcoming, you'll meet friends and you'll make friends you didn't know you could have, and all this sort of stuff. But it's true. And I've met people just like on the street in Tilburg during Roadburn, and there's still people I'm friends with now. So it is true. And yeah, we have more than, it varies a little bit year on year, but approximately 75% of the visitors that go to Roadburn are not from Belgium and the Netherlands.
Wow.
So it's a lot of international people, but there is a community element to it. And it's not about, Roadburn is a 4-day festival that happens every April in Tilburg, but it's more than that. It is a community. It is an ongoing like passion and love for music and the culture around music. So I think that continues all year round, and I think that's why it sort of has that sort of special X factor. But like I say, can't trust me, I'm totally biased.
Well, interesting point you made there about 75% of people coming from overseas to the festival. Excuse me. Out of interest, do you attend any UK festivals that happen? I mean, you have to be at Roadburn, so
Yes.
Take that aside. Do you go to any UK festivals?
Yes, I go to festivals quite often because bands that I work with are playing, but also because I like to snoop on what other festivals are doing.
Is that a fact?
Oh yeah, I like to go along and be like, oh, well, they're doing that. Oh, why didn't I think of that? Or, oh yeah, I've done that before. Nice try. So yeah, there's lots I go to. It does vary year on year. I go to Art Tangent most years. Now Desert Fest, Outbreak. I went to for the first time last year. I love that. Some smaller ones, like all dayers and things like that. I go to sometimes. Sometimes I go to Download, but that's big for me. It's not always my kind of thing, but
Sorry, what do you mean by big? As in the size of the festival?
yeah,
or...
overwhelming for me.
Oh right, okay.
But like, I mean, the lineups are always great at Download, of course, but I mean, I think that it's also great that a festival of that size still puts on smaller bands. So yeah, I like going to festivals. I mean, quite often after I've been to one, I'm like, why did I go to a festival? Like, this is terrible. I hate festivals. What am I thinking? And then I realized I do love festivals. It's just they're very tiring for me because I want to see as many bands as possible. I talk a lot, so I talk to people, and I basically am useless for about a week after any festival because like I'm processing everything I've seen and all the bands that I've seen and all the people I met and stuff. But yeah, I love festivals.
Yeah, the one thing I think from a UK perspective in festivals is just the weather.
Yeah,
It's so unpredictable. Like, you know, you could be at Download one year and it'll be 30 odd degrees, and you can go same time next year and it'll be a complete washout.
I mean, we do have that at Roadburn sometimes as well. One year we had sort of like 30, it's in April, so you sort of think it should be sort of mild getting into spring. One year we had snow and one year we had like 30-degree weather. So it does vary, but we're fortunate because it's an indoor festival, so the weather doesn't really affect people's enjoyment too much, although some people do camp, so I'd imagine snow probably affects their enjoyment a little bit, but overall we're very lucky in that respect that yes, it's indoor and we have great venues, so it's not too weather dependent.
Yeah, for sure. And who is I don't want to say who's the band you're most proud of booking at Roadburn?
That's a tricky one.
And it can't be Caven, okay?
It can't be Caven because I let that be someone else's responsibility, nothing to do with me. So I don't know if is proud. Like, so last year I was involved with booking Liturgy, which was very much a collaborative effort between several different groups of people. But we had Liturgy performing 2 sets on the main stage, one of which was the Origin of the Alamanies album, which was performed with orchestral accompaniment, and those musicians that played with Liturgy were from the Netherlands. So the booking of the band was not straightforward because there were many elements involved to arrange rehearsals in Tilburg before the performance, to make sure everyone was on the same page at all stages the whole way through the booking, and of course to get them on the stage once they got to Tilburg and perform at Roadburn. Both sets were incredible. Liturgy have played Roadburn before, about 10 years prior, at a tiny venue which doesn't exist anymore called the Bat Cave. So this was very different, playing the 3,000 capacity main stage twice. It was something I was very proud of, but it was very much a group effort to get that off the ground. But it was definitely one of those moments where you see it happening and you go, yes, we did that. It felt good. This year is a much more straightforward booking, but I'm very excited about Chat Pile. I'm a big fan of theirs, and they've been on my wish list for a little while, and I did put them forward for Roadburn 2022, and there wasn't nobody. It was a bit like there wasn't much going on. I mean, they released a couple of EPs, but this year is definitely the year it makes sense for them to play, and they've taken off this year in a way that I think probably nobody anticipated. So we have their only planned European show at Roadburn, so I'm very excited about that. So yeah, that's probably one I'm very much looking forward to this year.
And I mean, just touch on other couple like Deaf Heaven playing Sunbather in full, which I think they're doing that at Arctangent as well, I think.
Yeah, we booked them for 2 shows. They're doing Sunbather on the Thursday and Infinite Granite on the Friday. So when we invited them to do that, we knew that it was the 10-year anniversary of Sunbather, and that they I think there had been some conversation about whether they would want to play Sunbather sets. And of course we wanted that, but we really wanted them to be able to not just do something which was looking backwards, that was something that honored where they are now 10 years later, that like shows their progression, that shows their development as artists and spans their career like in all its different facets. So that's why we asked them to do 2 sets that kind of just about like bookend where they're up to in their career. So and obviously the albums have very different sort of vibes to them, so I think it would be quite nice to see them on consecutive nights doing those albums.
Is Sunbather a black metal album, Becky?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I would say yes. Yeah.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah.
When you're booking bands for Roadburn, do you have to? I mean, I imagine it's years. You're probably working years sometimes to book bands for future dates. Is there a certain criteria that you have for when booking bands for the festival, or does it start off with a blue sky thinking, then whittle down, or do you have sort of like, this band has to fit here, X, Y, and Z?
There's definitely not a formula. We don't even really talk about headliners that much at Roadburn, like, because we have, of course we have bands that are bigger than others, but we very rarely refer to headliners. Sometimes we do out of necessity, like, you know, and sometimes booking agents really want to know if their band is the headliner. But we put together a lot of the Roadburn lineup based on gut feeling and artistic sort of vision. And before I was involved with the booking side of things, I observed this from the outside when Walter was overseeing everything, and sometimes things he did made no sense, and I was like, where did this come from, or what's this idea, how has he come up with this? And it always worked out great in the end, but I'd be like, how did this happen? And now I'm part of that process as well. I find it hard to explain still, like, how do we get from A to B and end up with this? So a lot of it is done on gut feeling, and sometimes we, you know, especially if it is a booking agent that says, would you like to consider this band for Roadburn, we discuss it, and sometimes we know we really want to do it, or we really don't, and we can't explain why, other than it's just a Roadburn band, isn't it? Or definitely a Roadburn band. And what that criteria is something ethereal out there in the world that nobody quite understands. And the parameters of what a Roadburn band is or can be definitely have changed over the years. Like, Roadburn started as a more like psychedelic stoner doom festival, and we do still have elements of that music at Roadburn. We have broadened the horizons of the festival over, I don't know, probably the last 10 years or so specifically, but there's black metal, there's death metal, which is still relatively new to Roadburn. There's more hardcore sort of leaning bands this year, but there's definitely still lots of psych, ambient music, doom, and there are some bands that work at Roadburn now that wouldn't have worked a few years ago, and that's to do with the evolution of the festival. But also I think there's so many genres that refuse to be so many bands that refuse to be pigeonholed into a specific genre, that, you know, so I do a lot of the write-ups for when we do the announcements, and the number of times that I'm like, oh, I don't even know how to describe what this band sounds like. They encompass so many different elements, and I know that that's like, you know, I'm very conscious of the audience that I'm writing for when I'm doing write-ups for Roadburn, that because of the international visitors, obviously a lot of them do speak English, but there are people who don't speak English as their first language. So I want to do justice to the bands that we're presenting, but use language which is simple enough that people understand what they're getting when they come and see these bands. It's, you know, you don't want to read paragraphs and paragraphs of fluff about a band. What does it sound like? Is this somebody I want to go and see? So, but sometimes it's very hard to define, which is great. And I think that's exciting for music as a whole. It's exciting for people coming to Roadburn. It's just a pain for me to try and write that down in a concise way. But yeah, the depth and breadth of what can be a Roadburn band changes all the time. And yeah, like going back to what I was saying at the beginning of this, is that there isn't like it's not hierarchical. It's not you start with the smallest band at 1 p.m. and end with the biggest band at 11 p.m. It doesn't work that way. And a good example of that is several years ago now, when we had Cult of Luna. They wanted to have their full light show, which required full sound check, full, you know, everything right before they went on, which we couldn't do that at 10 p.m. So, you know, we had to say to them, if you want to do it exactly how you envisage, you need to be the first band of the day. And they said yes without hesitation, because that's where they can fulfill what their vision is for their performance. And playing at 3 p.m. on the main stage at Roadburn is not a bad slot. Like, there's still going to be 3,000 people watching you. And I guess another example of that is last year, the very first band of the festival, like, there was no other clashes. They were on a stage called the Terminal. We had Big Brave, and I think that they thought no one was going to watch them, because first band of the festival, people are still be getting their wristbands. People still there was a queue out the door. Like, there was 2,000 people watching this band, and it was, I think, especially important and a very like poignant sort of performance as well, because for a lot of people that was their first show, like post-pandemic. Like, a lot of people who came to Roadburn as their first thing that they went to, and a lot more people had only been to one or two things here and there. So to be surrounded by literally thousands of people again watching a band, that was a kind of an all new experience for a lot of people. So it was very cathartic. It was very like emotional, and yeah, it was not it's not a slight on Big Brave to be playing in that slot. It was an honor. And now when we're putting together the schedules for this year and into the future, we sometimes think about that slot, and on the other days of the festival, that's a slot where there's no clashes. And yes, it's early in the day, but we know our audience now, and we know that people will be there, people will go and see it. So who's the band that really needs to go in that slot, that has no clashes and no one else, and will really kick off the day and like sum up what we're doing at Roadburn? So it's a great slot to be in. So that's kind of more the way that we look at these things.
Is there one band that you have not played at the festival before that is within reach, so yeah, but budget wise as well, that you've been dying to get or want to get at Roadburn?
So my answer to this question has always been Botch, and it still is Botch. And we have tried to get them for Roadburn this year, but it was not possible due to a scheduling conflict. And for a moment there, we thought it was going to be possible, and it turned out not to be. But so it's still my answer. And you know, when it actually looked like it was going to maybe be a reality, I was allowed myself to actually envisage it happening. Whereas in the past, when people have asked me that question, I'm just like, yeah, it's Botch. I want to see Botch. I've never seen Botch, one of my favorite bands. And now, like, yeah, I've spent weeks thinking, imagine Botch playing. Oh, where would they fit in? And how would we do it? And what would it, you know? I've actually allowed myself to really envisage it. So the answer's still Botch. And maybe one day we'll manage it.
In the future,
but it feels a bit more. It feels a bit closer now. You never know.
Yeah. What another question I have, and I know this has been nearly an hour we've been chatting. This has flown by. It's been great.
I told you I like a chat. You know?
I've really enjoyed listening. So listening to all that you do, like, it sounds exhausting.
Oh yeah.
The amount of work you have on, and I'm just wondering, I mean, I don't know if you're in a current relationship or a relationship in the past or whatever, but what impact does it have on, a relationship like the job you do?
Well, my partner probably knows, he could probably write a book, tell all secrets of the music industry, stuff that he overhears when he brings me a cup of coffee when I'm on Zoom calls. But it's he's very patient. He comes to shows with me. And okay, I'm going to tell you a secret, which is not going to be a secret for long.
No.
Because, but his name's Jim, and he's great, and I love him. But Jim, we have a chart. I will never reveal the contents of this chart, but when he meets bands, or industry people, we judge them, silently on the way they respond to Jim. So if they shake his hand and are interested and have a conversation with him like a normal person, top of the chart. If they're just like, oh, he's not anyone in the music industry, then they're the bottom of the chart. If they snub it. So
and does this how like you plan your sort of dinner dates with people, like double?
Oh no, it's just helpful because like I like talking to people, so I will talk to anyone. And yeah, sometimes I walk away and go, oh, they were very strange. But when Jim's like, oh yeah, they were looking over your shoulder, looking for somebody more important to talk to, or whatever. Jim is a good like leveler. He's smart. Like he's but yeah, so the gymometer, it's invaluable when somebody isn't interested in talking to him because they think he's not important. I take note because he's very important.
Of course, he's your significant other. I mean, to be fair, the relationship you're in at the moment sounds like he's the perfect fit for your career.
Yeah,
like, it could really gotten better. maybe in previous it might have been bad, but I don't know. Like it's just because
it's great because there are many brilliant, wonderful people in the music industry, and I feel very fortunate to work with a lot of them. But there are definitely some idiots out there. And so therefore the gymometer is invaluable. And he's a good bullshit detector. Yeah.
He sounds like a great guy. Great partner.
I mean, I could lend him out to people, but I don't want he's great. But yeah, I've had I was actually talking about this earlier to Walter that I have an ex who used to tell me that my music taste was terrible, and I always thought that was weird because music taste is just music taste. It's like it's personal. Like somebody's music taste cannot be terrible. It's personal. Yeah. And I sometimes think of that person when I think about the great bands that I get to work with, or the bands that we book at Roadburn, and I do think not bad for somebody with terrible music taste, but yeah, it's I'm very happy with Jim. I couldn't do what I do without him because when I go to all these festivals, he often has to stay at home and look after the dog. So yeah.
Lovely. Final question just to wrap up with then. You've been in this industry 15 years, and what is your main goal within this industry? Is it to be, I don't know, chief band booker at Wacken? Or I'm just throwing stuff out there. Like that was completely off the top of my head, but
so I think I'm quite an ambitious person, but not really ambitious in that like there's a specific job that I want to do, or I want a promotion, or I want to earn a certain amount of money. I think it's more that if I can be continually stimulated by what I do, if I still continue to find it engaging, like if I started to find my work boring, then I would want a new challenge. I think that working in the music industry, I feel quite strongly, I mean, there are plenty of people that don't meet this criteria, but first and foremost, I want to be here because I love music, and that's what drives me to do this. It's what drove me to do this when I was starting out and I was hardly earning any money, and I didn't know how to make money, and I didn't know how to charge people correctly, and didn't have any confidence that what I was doing was right, but I knew I was doing the right thing because it was fulfilling. And so I don't ever want to lose sight of that. I don't want it to ever just be a job. And so in terms of like what my ambitions are, I want to continue, I hope I already am doing this, but if not, get better at it, supporting and championing new and exciting artists. That's what is at the core of what I hope I'm doing, and that's what drives me forwards, and that's what I want to continue doing. And if the work that I do stops being fulfilling, then I mean, it seems very unlikely that music as a whole is going to suddenly be not interesting anymore. So I need to find another way to keep that interesting. So yeah, I guess that I just want to continue with what I've started, and I'm sure there'll be new ways, new avenues, and new bands that I will get to work with along the way. But yeah, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing, whatever form it takes, I suppose.
Great answer. Very, very nicely put. And it's really nice to see the passion like shining through about what you do. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, Becky. You know, thank you so much for being so open and honest with your answers. And I told you I wouldn't answer too many intrusive questions. I think I stuck to that.
Yeah, it's fine. I think I was the one that gave away the secret. I didn't have to tell you about the gymometer, but
no, or the
but
chart.
now, what if people ask me where they are on the?
That's the worry now.
Then I will never tell. It's a secret. Or I'll tell everyone they're right at the top and just.
Oh yeah, you could say that. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
But no, thank you. And listen, thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy, and for all you do, you know, even just sending us promos and stuff, it's great help to us to have them all, and chatting to the bands you work with. And who knows, maybe I'll see you at Roadburn.
Yes.
I will go. I promise.
You should.
Yeah,
you should
I will.
come.
I will. And I'll hit you up and I'll buy you a drink at the bar. But
all right.
Sorry, Becky. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck for the rest of the year.
You too.